welcome to the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship Season 3 Contender Introduction Series. Before the show goes live on November 2nd, starting from now, every Sunday I will be introducing one of the 8 contenders who competed for the Ultimate Self-Defense Champion title. Not only will you get to know more about them, but I'll also be asking them your questions. So make sure to check out Martial Arts Journey YouTube channel's community section, where you can pose your questions to the next contender. And now, without further ado, let's get to know one of the USDC Season 3 contenders. So Randy, it's really great to see you again after a few months now passed. How were those months? How are your reflections after the championship?
Good. You know, it was, that whole experience was really awesome. Really cool to meet yourself, the whole crew, cast, and all the competitors. It was great. The reflection afterwards was, I'd like to do it again. And then part of me was like, maybe not. So I would say I had some conflicting back and forth when it came to reflection.
Nice. Actually, that reminds me of the Sensei Seth's story, because after season 1, I think kind of the floating around phrase was, "This is one of the best experiences I will never want to do again." that was like the main one. But then I invited Seth for season 2, and he immediately said, "No, I'm not gonna do it." But then 2 years passed, and I was like, "Would you do it again now?" And he's like, "Actually, I would." So just time had to pass. But at the same time, like, I did it myself in season 1 as a contestant as well, and now I'm like, I think one time was enough. It was like plenty. That experience was enough. So I understand both sides. But it's great to see that you reflect like part of you. I guess it means that it was a good experience. That part of you would come back. Another part of you is like, I think I had it, right?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to sum it up. Yeah.
Nice, cool. So for people who haven't got to know you before, I mean, my short introduction would be super soldier. You have so much experience. I mean, people will get to know more about that. You're not just, it's not only training, but actual field experience, many years, many missions. And also on top of that, you're a former MMA champion in Canada, correct?
Yeah, so I served 21 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. 16 of those years were with an organization called Joint Task Force 2. And then while I was serving at Joint Task Force 2, I was also fighting competitively with professional mixed martial arts. So I fought for 10 years while trying to manage kind of two careers at the same time. Yeah, so I had some success with MMA, but also had a few shortfalls as well. And then with my military career as well, I had, quite a few combat deployments, Afghanistan, did some stuff in Bosnia in the early days, did some stuff in Lebanon. So I traveled around a little bit, got some operational experience, but I decided to walk away from the Canadian Armed Forces in 2019 after 21 years. And then I decided to retire from MMA competition at age 40 in 2018.
Got it. Well, actually, so having a Special Forces soldier was one of my dreams for the championship. Like I always thought, like, oh, that would be so interesting to see, how you would do, how such a person would do things differently, what would work, what wouldn't work. Because USDC is kind of like a little bit like, it's not a perfect lab, but it's a little bit like a lab, like a testing area. But then I thought, how will I ever find such a person? And then we have a mutual acquaintance, Jeff Chan, champion of season 1, and we were having breakfast together one day, and he's like, oh, by the way, there's someone I know who would be down to do it, who has a Special Forces training background. And I was like, what? Oh yeah, let's do this. So can you tell a little bit about that, about your relationship with Jeff Chan and that beginning of the
Yeah. So Jeff and I have known each other for quite some time. And when Jeff was literally, he was just a teenager when we started training MMA together. He was young. And good, really good dude, great athlete, just a genuine human being. And we've always gotten along. We've always, competed and trained hard together. And when he started to kind of take off with the YouTube presence that he does have now, we stayed in contact and continued to support each other. And I was always there to see Jeff do well. And he would be in Ottawa every now and again. And whenever he was in Ottawa, we'd train, we'd connect and catch up a little bit. And I think I saw a couple of snippets of when he was on season 1. And it looked pretty interesting, but I'll be completely honest, I didn't watch a lot of the episodes at that time. I just saw kind of a few snippets, but it looked interesting. And then after watching a couple of episodes and actually getting a little bit more information on what he was doing, then I was enticed. So I reached out to him, asked him when he was in Ottawa again. In that conversation, I said, "Hey, tell me a little bit more about the USDC," and then that's how it kind of started.
What was your main motivation in joining? I mean, there's a few I could guess or predict, but how would you describe your motivation? What attracted you to trying out the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship?
After watching a couple of the episodes and seeing kind of the thought that went behind the scenarios, I looked at it like a challenge, and I thought, well, how would I navigate some of these scenarios? Because part of what I do now with the business of direct action is I provide a lot of training for military and law enforcement, and I put a lot of heavy emphasis on active role players and scenarios to elicit specific techniques and tactics that we're trying to highlight. So, scenarios are really well thought out. And looking at some of the ones for USDC, as I was watching it, just being completely transparent, there was part of it when I was watching, I was like, well, that's surely 100% for entertainment value. And then there's others that were, to me, like well thought out, intelligent in terms of making the competitor think, and not only think, but use a controlled level of force that would be appropriate for a real-time situation. So I thought it was really cool. It enticed my interest. It definitely piqued my interest, and that was the main motivation. Was I wanted the experience, but I also saw it as a great way to meet some really cool people. So those, I would say, were the two major influencers or motivators for wanting to be involved.
Very cool. Yeah, I actually agree with you, especially in terms of season 1 and season 2, that there was a mix of some of the challenges were more kind of like entertainment, especially like fighting on the bus. There is that kind of a deeper message of, well, train in different environments and predictable environments, but a lot of it was still like, this is action. And for season 3, just to give a heads up to the audience, or hint to the audience, that there was much more intention of trying to create those scenarios, like where you said, like that would make the contestants think and would surprise them. Would you say that you experienced that in season 3?
Yeah, there was, similar. There, no spoilers, not to give anything away. There were a couple of scenarios that were, after walking out of it, I'm like, could I actually see that happening? Like, we don't know. The reality is we just don't know. In today's world, anything is possible. What is most probable versus what is possible? Sometimes there's, some subtle differences. Sure. But some of the scenarios after walking out of it, I thought to myself, I don't know, could that possibly happen? And others were like, 100%. That was as close to real as you possibly could. And I will caveat that with, you did a good job with the role players. And, I said it quite a bit while we were there. Controlled role players that will, act a certain way consistently is difficult to do. And also with those poor guys, man, they took a beating. So like some of those scenarios were very, very well done. And I do think the fans, the viewers, are gonna appreciate the amount of time and effort that went into the thought behind the scenarios.
Okay, so I'll get on to the next part, which is the most important part, the questions from the audience. From your experience being in special operations, what techniques and procedures stuck with you the most, and how did they help you on this show being experienced in the special forces field?
Very good question.
Before we continue, I have some cool news. The Atomic Bear returns as a sponsor for season 3, and now you can win their Stealth Pen Pro absolutely free. When you hear improvised weapon, you probably don't think a pen. But the Stealth Pen Pro is not an ordinary ink pen. Yes, it writes really well with a sharp and responsive ballpoint tip, but its real advantage is the rock-solid grip for unparalleled retention and stopping power. The Stealth Pen Pro also hides a glass breaker for car safety and reveals DNA-catching teeth for that extra blast of impact. Last season, Jesse Ancom and Nathan Levy ended 3 knife attacks with this very pen. So if you want one, don't wait. Enter now at theatomicbear.com/USDC. We'll run a new giveaway every week, and every entry also scores you a shot at the luxurious Guardian Titanium Pen Grand Prize. Now back to the Q&A.
What techniques and procedures I would say highlight the most was like an element of situational awareness. For an example, like without giving anything up, but the very first exposure to the show in Lithuania, I felt something was off, and I did not listen to my gut feeling, and I was way too relaxed. So I would say if there was an element that my previous place of employment taught me where I clearly let my guard down a little bit, it was that. So an element of situational awareness, there's there's a challenge to always be on and be consistently scanning the environment and collecting information. And when I say that, from a personal protection perspective is one thing, from an operational execution and evaluation of trying to do the job well is very different. What I mean by that is when you're on the job, you're on. And when you're traveling, you're on, but not at the same element, because there's really, like in this case, there's just myself to worry about from a safety perspective. And I'm not trying to collect information. I'm not looking out for, any potential dangers per se, because I'm aware of what's going on in my close proximity. So any tactics or procedures from previous place of employment that I would say was executed during the show was, once we were in it, I was consistently scanning and consistently being aware of what might come next. So I was very quickly turned on, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
land into the country was a bit not fully engaged. And then once that first incident happened, I'm like, okay, now I need to be, dialed in.
Regarding firearms in self-defense scenarios, in your opinion, what are some of the most common misconceptions people have when it comes to defending against firearms and or using them for self-defense? What would you say is an appropriate mindset to have in these scenarios?
Regardless of the tool that is the extension of the hand, one needs to be trained and proficient on it. So just because you own a firearm, but if you seldom use it or are proficient with how to reload the gun or deal with malfunctions, it's going to be more of a liability than potentially an asset. So because the question is pertaining to firearms, I would say from a self-defense perspective, know how to draw the gun, know how to carry it, conceal a gun. If we're being completely honest about the situation of carrying a firearm for personal protection, number one would be know, respect, and understand the laws and the rules in the environment that you're operating, if you're even allowed to do that. And then if all those boxes are checked, then, because the question is pertaining to firearms, and I'll answer as best as I can, using a firearm is no different than using your hands or using your head. There are elements of proficiency that are required, and the only way you get there is through doing it and training it. So, how to deal with a malfunction, or how to deal with a reload, or just the sheer execution of shot placement and accuracy. All that stuff takes time. All that stuff is practice with proficiency over time. I think Hollywood and some of the movie drama cinematics give a falsified sense of security with regard to firearms. And the reality is it's harder than people think.
With being the best of the best in combat, did you feel any sense of pressure to win? And did you expect to do better and worse? And however you did. So better and worse, I guess there's a little bit of that spoiler area. But maybe some general thoughts there in terms of expectations versus reality. But also this one, if I'll just rephrase it, it was an interesting question for me as well, because coming from such area as the special forces, which everyone just sees as the highest peak, did you feel some pressure kind of representing that field yourself?
Yeah, I felt some pressure because of my background, and also, like, I'm a proud Canadian, and I want to make Canadians proud, not only Canadians in uniform and special forces, but just in general. So I feel pressure, for sure, self-induced pressure. Like, it's all fun. It's, it's controlled, it's safe, but there's an element of competitiveness. There's an element of real sustained injury as well. There was potential where, like, if I get hurt, for an example, I don't have the ability to generate income and keep, the lights on. So I need to be cautious about, staying safe. So there was multiple different levels of pressure not to get hurt, pressure to perform well, pressure to put, special forces on the map, so to speak, in this realm. So yeah, I felt a little bit of pressure. The reality piece versus entertainment, like we talked about earlier, there were some discrepancies there on, what would be, real per se. But I think, like we addressed it already, I think as close as real as possible were the scenarios. What's different about, and I want to make this clear because this might highlight the point. What's different about a individual based self-defense scenario versus special forces is often, not always, but often, when we do jobs, we are seldom alone, right? So when we're doing our job, yes, special forces soldiers are tough. They're motivated, they're intelligent, they're critical thinkers. They're all of those things. But where I'm going with this is very seldom are they by themselves. So a special forces soldier by himself, if he's swarmed by 2 or 3 dudes that are armed with bats, knives, and guns, it does not matter if he's a special forces soldier. Again, Hollywood and the cinematic sometimes give a falsified sense of what a special forces soldier can do. The reality is numbers are a factor. Weight, speed, strength, size, velocity, those are all factors. So I think the pressure to perform based on my background, not only as a special forces soldier, but also as an mixed martial artist, I feel like I could have done better. I should have done better in some scenarios, but also in other scenarios, I think, yeah, I did. I would say like the 95% solution to the outcome desired.
Wanting to be the best, aiming for the best possible result. Do you think that's almost like a necessity for special forces?
I do. I think that competitive mindset is pretty common. A lot of alpha males with the guys that I work with. And, I would also say, based on what happened and not giving anything away, but based on what happened the very first morning on day 2, or sorry, the morning of day 2, when I hurt that role player, there was a moment afterwards where I thought, man, I need to dial this back a little bit because I don't want to seriously hurt anybody. But when that happened, I became, I won't say gun shy, but it was like, wait a minute, this is a show. These are human beings. Everybody is here to generate some entertainment. And I feel like after that incident happened, I did dial back a little bit from like an overall aggression and competitive perspective, because you're absolutely right. I am 100% competitive. Like if there's a jelly bean eating contest, I want to win it. I'm just that type. But when I hurt that guy, there was a moment where I was like, a reflection, I was like, man, I didn't come here to seriously hurt anybody. I didn't come here to get hurt. I just need to kind of manage that level of aggression a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, that moment was spectacular too. I mean, people will eventually see what it was, and it was some amazing display of skill. Which to a degree, that's why to agree, I'm happy that happened. But also, I acknowledge like it's a hard balance, because like also too, like especially like for example, if somebody goes to UFC and they fight in a cage, they're all getting paid. Obviously, there's the whole underpaid phenomenon, but to a degree, they're getting a significant payment. They're all there to build a long-term career, and so that's the main reasons why they put themselves on the risk, and both sides do it. So it's very different conditions. Like you go all out, or even like in any MMA cage or competition. Whereas USDC, it's kind of that it's not there at that level where there's no long-term future. There's
Right.
no super great reward at the end. A lot of it's still about that personal experience for even the attackers as well. So yeah, and it kind of makes it a little bit weird, I admit it, because there is the belt and the scores, but also there's on some level it's like it's an experience, and it's hard to probably find that perfect spot like where to honor both, I imagine.
And I think as the week went on, there were long days. There were a lot of waiting and preparation for the scenarios. And in those waiting moments, that's where a lot of the bonding happened amongst the contestants. We get to know each other, and you're chatting and stuff, and then you get to compete against each other. And then I don't know. I think I can only speak for myself, but getting to know all those guys and having a few laughs and stuff, the last thing you want to do is hurt anybody. At the end of the day, they just have them go back home in a healthy state with a smile on their face and with a good experience. So there's that, and then there's the competitive side. It's like you only get a few days to kind of do the best that you possibly can. You want to put your best foot forward. So yeah, it's the trying to strike that balance.
How effective would you say military combative training is for self-defense compared to the MMA experience you have?
Oh, great question. I would say is the special forces, what it really does is it hardens one's resolve to push through and persevere difficult times. With MMA, there are challenging moments in preparation and training leading up to the competition. But the competition is in a controlled environment with a referee to ensure two athletes' safety. There's rules associated. There's structure. So it's different, challenging. Yes, MMA for sure from a mental perspective. But what I believe special forces training and operations provide is that element of resolve where we don't stop until the job is done. There is no clock that says, our shift starts at 8 and we're off the clock at 5. There is an element of perseverance to push through and get the job completed. So I believe years of that tempo and that element of pressure to sustain high output, high performance, it makes you tough mentally.
Is there a lesson you learned from your experience in the military that came in hand for USDC?
Yeah. There's a couple of things actually. Through military training, understanding how to assess potential dangers, a way to kind of break it down, and this would be beneficial for anybody that's just interested in their own personal protection, is the hands do the damage. So assessing hands before anyone even gets close enough to go hands-on is important. So what's in the hand, and then our assessment of what potentially harmful effects the extension of the hand could execute is important, because that if we were able to read the hands and if we're able to create angles and distance based on what we see and assess as a potential danger, it's going to give us a few options. So I executed that, I think, quite well, reading the hands quickly and figuring out, is this something I need to worry about? Like, of course, somebody that is 6'6" and 250 pounds that is empty-handed can still do a lot of damage. That's not my point. But I believe, like, a systematic way to read the environment and read the hands and assess the level of danger. I did that pretty consistently in the USDC.
Do you think your ability to operate in groups gives you an advantage over, for example, someone trained in only combat sports in some self-defense scenarios?
I do. I think working in a team dynamic is very different than individual-based outcomes. So I do think that, like anything, that takes time as well. I would say any martial artist, they still have a team, even though it may be an individual based sport. In order for them to get to the level of competition, they need training partners, they need teammates. So it is a team oriented, I would say, evolution. However, the execution of the combat sport is individual based, where, special forces, we talked about it earlier, military, law enforcement, generally you're operating in a minimum of teams of 2. So it does make a difference. And I would say what makes even more of a difference is when you get a group of people that are very like-minded, and we've worked together for quite some time. You already know what each other are thinking. We can read body language really well. We can already kind of anticipate what is about to unfold without any words. So it does make a difference. Yeah.
Did you need to control the intensity of your techniques very much? And if so, by how much or how often during the season?
Yeah. Like we touched on it earlier. It was early in the competition where I got ramped up, and role player got hurt. A few stitches were administered. We'll just leave it at that. And I did make an adjustment. I did make adjustment throughout. And in fact, the last day, again, not giving anything away, but the last day there was a series of really cool scenarios. And one was in a confined space. And I remember having a hold of one of the competitor's legs, and I contemplated kind of like slamming him into the ground. Mm-hmm. And I remember just kind of letting it go. Like it went through my head, and I was like, nah, man, someone can seriously get hurt here. So I don't know. I believe that I have a pretty healthy amount of emotional control and personal control with aggression. I would be completely lying if I said, what happened on day 2 didn't have an effect on me for the rest of the week. It did. So I made an adjustment.
Where can the audience find out more about you and maybe a few words about Direct Action?
Sure. Yeah, Direct Action is a Canada-based company providing a lot of tactical training for military and law enforcement. So tactical firearms training, CQB, and defensive tactics is primarily the 3 areas that I provide for. I have a YouTube channel, Direct Action Combat, Instagram, Direct Action Combat. And if people want to send an email, reach out, questions about anything, they can reach me at info@directactions.ca.